Welcome back, everyone, to part 4 of Secret Scratch-Off Lottery Strategies. Today we're going to talk about my theory of ending games. I'll digress a little bit into this North Star Lottery Group scandal that happened in Illinois, just to make you aware that there are things going on sometimes in state lotteries that are impacting us as players. So then I'll go into my theory about these no longer distributed games, and I believe every state will be the same, but determining whether it's no longer being distributed may be more difficult in your state. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, that I ended up in the Chicago Tribune because of what happened to me, and I'll tell you it all sort of ties together. So the first thing is, in our state, at least, there's a list of remaining top prizes. And when I started theorizing about this game, I got honed into this little check mark by these games. Some of these have check marks. And what that means is that it's no longer being distributed. And I started wondering about that. If it's not being distributed, I thought, then what's going on with these tickets? Is the game just ended, or is it just not? Are they just out of in stock and they're not putting them in the retailers? So I started doing a little bit of research, and it led me to this story in the Tribune, and it's about the scratch-offs. This is the North Star Lottery Group scandal, and what happened was this company was running the lottery in the state of Illinois. Illinois is the first state in the country to have a private lottery company manage it for them. And what they were doing is they were ending games before the top prizes were paid out. So people were paying to try to win these top prizes, and they had no intention of distributing these top prizes. And they ended the game, collected all the money from all the losing tickets that they sold, and never had to pay out the top prizes. So when I saw that article, I just sort of tucked it into the back of my mind. And when I was looking back at this game here, this $2 million Jumbo Bucks game, and there's also another one down here called $3 million Jumbo Bucks game, no longer distributed, but still a top prize. This one had $3 million, and this one had $2 million. So I began to think about that, and I started wondering if these games are just more difficult to find because they're not being distributed anymore. So the theory behind this is, let me illustrate it with this PowerPoint presentation. So let's pretend that this is the universe of retailers in the marketplace. And if the game is no longer being distributed, that means there's less and less retailers that are going to be carrying that game. But the top prize, if they're no longer being distributed into the retailers, the top prize is just sitting there in one of these retail locations. And as the universe of retailers carrying these tickets goes away, you end up with a small number of retailers that could possibly have it. So I started checking around with some retailers, and I discovered that the game was being removed by the lottery agent at the retailers' locations. So that made me think of the story in the Tribune that I read previously. So I contacted that reporter, Matt Wahlberg, who was part of that story, and wanted to find out if this was still happening in the state of Illinois. And I wanted to tell him what I had discovered. Well, we had been trying to contact each other for some time, and in the meantime, I had my own situation that happened to me, which I'll go back to in a second. But so I ended up chasing another game that was no longer distributed. It was a $2 game. It was $20,000 taxes paid. I figure I can test it on that game because it was a low cost, low face value. It wouldn't cost a lot of money to try it. And it wasn't being sold in all the retailers. So I started finding retailers that did have it, and I was buying some of those tickets, thinking that maybe it would improve my odds, which led me to realize that I can't do this without a universe of people out there in the state and in the various parts of the country trying these methods out, because I can't be in all these different retail locations. So, for instance, this game, this is the $250,000 taxes paid game. And let me kind of zoom in on this little area down here and show you what I'm talking about. So this is some statistics we'll do, and I'll go through this in more detail in another video. But in this case, I estimate that as of shooting to this video, there's about 580,000 remaining tickets. But when you start looking at the analysis of the game, you realize that that these are sold in books, and so then what you can look at is say, okay, estimated remaining books are 4,800. So what that means is that the tickets aren't distributed amongst 8,000 retailers at all times, because when the book runs out, the retailer doesn't have it anymore. So now there's less and less, as my illustration showed, less and less retailers that have the game in their stores. So in this case, if there's about 4,800 books, that means there could only be about 4,800 retailers carrying this game. And that one prize is in one of the 4,800 retail locations. So still a lot of retail locations, but if you're in an area that has this game or a game similar to it that's no longer being distributed, this might be a game and this might be a strategy to go for. Because a lot of people say, well, if there's not a lot of remaining prizes, don't play. But as you saw in my other videos, it's all based on the pools, and this is the last pool, and these are the last remaining tickets, and they're not being distributed. So that ticket is just sitting there on a shelf somewhere, waiting to be purchased. And as the retailers fall off, it becomes easier and easier to find that winning ticket. So that's what I did, and I ended up buying all these tickets, or some of these tickets, to test the theory. And then what happened was I came home and I looked at the remaining prize list to see it had been updated, and sure enough, just hours earlier, if I would have checked, it turns out that top prize was sold. And so after I finally heard from the reporter, I was able to tell him that story. And he said it was interesting that happened to me, because he was just doing a story on something very similar to that, and it ends up being a front page article that after top prizes are gone, lottery keeps selling the tickets. Well, he used my story in this article, and my story appears down here, because it's exactly what he's trying to expose, is the fact that we as players, if we don't know that the remaining prizes are gone and we're buying these tickets, it's sort of deceptive. It is very deceptive. So this article exposes that. And it's another thing for everyone to be aware of. It's another one of these tips for playing the game. Be aware of the number of remaining prizes that are left, and play smart. So that's the end of this video. Remember to subscribe, share it with your people that you think might benefit from it, and looking forward to the next video. Thank you.